Hello guys, welcome back to another video. In today's video I'm talking about how to take calibration files. So when you're taking calibration files, there's three main types. You have your flats, your darks, and your bias. They're all useful, the most useful one being flats in my opinion. So what they actually do. Flat panels are used for a lot of things. The biggest one being gradient correction. So it's like, let's say you're in a dark skies, you're in like a city sky, for example me, I don't have very dark skies where I'm at. You're going to use flats and they help correct the gradient for the most part, especially if there's like a vignetting inside of your telescope, stuff like that. It'll help fix those. Not 100%, but it should pretty much get rid of it. It also helps with things like dust or dust spots, any kind of debris that's on your telescope. It'll just subtract that out, which gives it just a nice flat background, which is really useful. In any circumstance. You should always take flats no matter what. For darks on the other hand are really useful for things like amp glow, and they also help with noise and other like banding and other issues that your camera might have. Darks, and then you have bias. Bias are pretty much the same thing as darks, but there's a lower exposure, and they do kind of the same thing. They get rid of like noise. If you notice, if you take really short exposures, like maybe 0.01, sometimes your camera will get these weird like lines. You'll get rid of those if your photos ever have those, stuff like that. Bias and darks are not as important. Like if you don't have amp glow in your camera, you can probably get away with not using darks, but for the most part you probably should still take them. It just helps, but it doesn't hurt. So when you're taking, I'm gonna start with the flats. When you're taking your flats, the most important part of taking flats is having a flat light. So a lot of people take flats using the shirt method, which is you just take a white t-shirt and you wrap it around your telescope with the cover off, of course, make sure the cover's off, and then you rubber band it to the top, and then you have, a lot of people use like different softwares. I use, ASIR just because it's easy, and it'll just create an auto exposure for you, finding the perfect exposure for the flat. If you're trying to find the exposure yourself, you want the histogram to be, if it's spread out, you want the histogram to be in the middle, around there. So whatever exposure it's around the middle is where it's supposed to be. But like I said, nowadays there's software out there that'll just do that for you. So there's really no need to waste your time trying to figure out the correct exposure. Usually it's pretty short exposure, especially since you have your telescope open to a bright source of light. But the problem with doing the t-shirt method is, well, the sky isn't a flat, all illuminated background. And like, let's say you're imaging somewhere where the sun's right here and the sun's right there, it'll be darker down here than it's up there, which will create uneven flats, which is not good. You want as accurate as possible. So I recommend getting just a flat panel. So this is not a flat panel. This is a stencil board that I bought on Amazon for like 20 bucks. And all it does is it lights up. And if I wanted to, I can use it to trace stuff. That's what it's actually made for. But I just bought it for the flat panel because it serves the same purpose of having a flat light, illuminating light, so that I have proper flats. Super useful. You can spend more money and get those fancy ones made for telescopes. They do the same thing. I wouldn't waste your time. Just buy like a $20 one on Amazon for whatever size scope you have, and it should work fine. And going on to darks, when you're taking darks, there are a couple things you need to consider. Same thing with flats and pretty much all of them. You always want your focus to be about the same for everything. Darks, flats, bias. It doesn't matter as much with flats, but darks and bias, you want you want your focus, your temperature to be the same. So you want to cool your camera to whatever temperature it was, and also gain. You want your gain, your temperature, your focus all to be the same as when you were imaging at night. So let's say like last night I was imaging at negative 30 Celsius, and my gain was 120. Then I would put the settings as negative 30, 120 gain. Just keep it the same. When it comes to flats, you also want to make sure the filter is the same. If you're using, like, I'm doing a monochrome camera, I'm looking over there because my telescope's over there. You want your filter to be the same. So I'm taking flats for my hydrogen photos, and I'm using my HA filter or my green, red, blue. Same thing. You need to take flats for each and every single filter at each and every single exposure. Flats, you don't need to worry about the exposure because, like I said, the software will find the correct exposure for you, but you still need the gain to be the same. And if you can, temperature, it doesn't really matter that much, but if you can, temperature be the same too. But yeah, when you're taking flats, like I said, remember, make sure that the temperature, gain, especially gain, are the same, and that when you're taking flats, yeah, then it should work fine. Just use the panel. When taking darks, the thing with darks is you need to match everything, including the exposure. So, for example, last night I was taking photos of just stars for a photo I'm working on. So I was doing 60-second exposure at 120 gain, and I was doing that -30 Celsius. So I matched all of those settings, and the only difference you need to do is you just literally put the cover on your telescope and put it in a dark place. That's it. So with darks, it's literally the same exact, like you can literally just reset your plan for whatever you're imaging and just throw the cover on your telescope and image. That's it. That's how you take darks. There's nothing fancy when it comes to it. You choosing the dark setting on like ASI Air doesn't magically turn it into a dark. You need to make sure that it's actually dark. You're not actually taking in any light by putting the cover over your telescope and putting it in a dark place. Same thing with bias. Bias is the exact same thing as dark, except for the exposure not the same. So with bias, you just want to get the exposure literally as low as you can. I usually do my biases at like 0.001. Just really low exposure, and just do like, I don't know, 50 of them. Same thing with darks. For darks, flats, and bias, it's not really the more the better. Have at least 30 per thing, but just 50. I usually just do like 50, and there should be plenty. But yeah, bias, same thing as darks. Make sure the cover's on and make sure it's in a dark place. You don't want it to be in a bright place, because if you have the cover on and you're taking darks in a bright area, you're just going to get light leaks and other things, and then your darks will be messed up, and it won't actually be dark, so it'll just be a modified flat panel. But yeah, going over it again, your flat panels, make sure to have a flat, bright surface you can put in front of the telescope with the cover off when you're taking these flat panels, so that it's even and that it's as accurate as it can be. Dark panels, remember, cover on, dark place, and you need to match the focus that you had that night, the temperature you had that night, and also the gain. Make sure the gain too. Same thing with bias. It's just the only difference between bias and dark is darks you take the same exposure length as you did for the photo, and bias you just do really low exposure. But yeah, keep looking over my telescope because I'm about to take flats, darks, and biases. I'm going to show you guys what it looks like in the ASI Air. I'm taking my flats, darks, and biases, and kind of how I set it up, and that's it. So I have my scope here, and I'm gonna get ready to take flats, and I just have my flat panel right here. Another thing I forgot to say in the last part was you don't need to take darks and biases super often. Realistically, like once a year. For flat panels, I would do them every single photo, if not every single night, because the more flats, the more often you take flats. You should always take them the day, the night, the morning after you take photos. Just make them as accurate as to what they were, because things like dust, debris, it constantly changes every night. So let's say you take a photo and then you take flats for that photo the week after, it's going to be not the right flats. So you always want to take flats as soon as possible after you image, especially for like long integration projects, because getting just improper flats for half the photo, it's just kind of messes things up. I'm not going to show the entire process, but basically you literally, like I said, I have the cover off, and then I just put the flat panel in front up to like that, and then I do the rest on my phone. That's it. You just put the flat panel up there, and yeah, I'm gonna turn off the lights when I take the flats, so I don't get any light leaks. But yeah, that's pretty much it. So when setting up your bias or on your night bias, your calibration files to take, just go into auto run, and I already have them set up here, but as you can see, all I did was my different channels. We have red, green, and blue for our flat panels. And just match the settings. I was doing 120 gain, and I was shooting at bin 2 because my camera is the ASI, or ZWO ASI 294mm Pro, which I need to use bin 2 for that camera. Anyway, I would do only like 30. You don't need that many times amount of flats. So I just do 30 flats for each. And remember, exposure on auto. I wouldn't try and find the exposure yourself. It's too much of a hassle. Same thing here for blue, just same thing with blue panel, same thing with green panel. And for my darks, I matched the exposure. I was doing 60-second exposures. On the red filter, it doesn't matter the filter, because like I said, you're taking darks, you're not actually taking any light. So you can put any filter you want. It literally doesn't matter. Same gain, and about 30, like I said. Bias, 0.001 exposure. I always do that exposure. It works fine with me. And same thing, filter doesn't matter. Make sure your gain is, see, I caught myself. Your gain's at 120, or whatever gain you were using that night. And I just repeat 50 because it takes less time. Darks usually take the longest because you're matching the exposure. So if I was doing 5-minute exposures, it would take a pretty long time to get 30 to 5-minute exposures. And that's just the way it is. Anyway, now that I have all these set up, I'm going to turn off my darks and biases. I don't want to use those right now. I just want to do the flats. And then we're going to start it up. As you can see, my temperature isn't always at the perfect one. Like I said, flats, you don't need the temperature to be exactly what it was. But by the time I've done with the flats, it'll be at the right temperature. Anyway, we're going to start. And it's just going to figure out the right exposure. And right now I'm just holding my, what's it called? My light to my telescope, the flat panel that I showed you guys earlier. And so that it creates a flat light so it can calibrate the flats correctly. And here it goes. I'm ready to the first one. This is what it looks like. So flats, so when I say that the histogram should be in the middle, if you look on the bottom where the histogram is, see how the little oomph is in the middle? You kind of want it to be, like I said, in the middle, right there. And that means that the flats are being taken properly. And yeah, if you look closely, you can see the vignetting and other kind of things. And this is the kind of stuff it'll subtract from your photo so it looks better. And also, if there's any dust spots, I don't really see any dust spots, but if there was dust spots, you would see them very clearly in your flats, and it'll also subtract that and any other dust. Anyway, it's already finished in my red channel, so flats don't take very long. Like I said, very low exposure, and it's already shooting my blue. And this is what the flats with blue look like. See? Different. So every filter is a different flat. So like I said, don't use red flats on a blue or like anything else. Take flats for each and every filter. Or else you just be using the wrong flat. This one does have a dust spot, as you can see right here, a little dust spot. But yeah, for the most part, it's fine. All of this stuff will be subtracted. And now it's calibrating for my green channel. And it's showing it right now. And this is my green. So green, okay, I guess I'm gonna have to delete that. I took a photo while it was still flipping to the green thing. Anyway, this is what the green flat looks like. And yeah, it's almost done. And next I'm move on to my darks. Remember, darks you want it to be in a dark place, so right now I'm turning off the flat panel light. I'm also putting the cover on my telescope. So remember, dark area, remember the cover on your telescope, and then we're gonna turn off, we're gonna reset this, turn off our flats, like this, because we don't want to take more flats. Turn on our dark and turn on our bias. I'm gonna show bias first because it's easier to show. Works. So flip them around. 1 second. Okay. So we have our bias and our darks. And the same thing, we're going to make these the same filter because might as well. Anyway, we're going to start now. Remember the bias, low exposure, darks, same exposure as you were imaging for whatever night you were doing. So when I see the banding, this is what I'm talking about. See the little band marks? It'll fix that in the photo if there is any. And yeah, bias goes by really, really fast. Because like I said, it's such low exposure, they go by very fast. This is what a dark panel looks like. Pretty much the same as a bias, the only difference mine being I have amp glow right here, as you can see. And like I said, it'll just subtract this amp glow and also any other thing it finds in the photo that it shouldn't be there. But yeah, that's pretty much it. This is how you take darks, bias, and flats. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Yeah, hope you guys have a good day. Bye-bye.